25,550. That's the number of days that God has given me on the earth so far. 613,200 hours. 36,792,000 minutes. Both of my parents died of Alzheimer's disease, one at age 86 and the other at 92. So if genetics are as persuasive as science tells us they are, I maybe have about 16 good years left, 5,280 days, and perhaps a few years that won't be so good. In other words, my life is about 80% over. And no, I don't want to think about stuff like that on this day that's the happiest birthday I've ever had. As usual, preaching assignments for this church year were agreed upon at a ministers' meeting in August. And I fully expected to be given this very Sunday because it's one of the ones known throughout all denominations as a seminarian Sunday. You know, a holiday weekend when most people are away or involved with family activities, church attendance is light, and they send in the rookie to preach and to make mistakes in front of sparse crowds. But when I got home from the ministers' meeting and saw what today's date was, I began to cry with gratitude, for I never thought I would be leading worship on my 70th birthday. What a great and amazing gift to be with all of you in this sanctuary today. And what another gift to have friends who have great senses of humor and who usually, but unintentionally, say something hilarious to me that jumpstarts the writing of a sermon. In this case, it was a catch-up conversation with an old friend at a local coffee house in early September. We talked about her grandkids, my seminary classes, some college memories, our knee replacements, our dogs, and books we had recently read. And as we carefully cut a small brownie in half to share it, Judith, whose husband is a retired minister, said, So what are your sermons going to be about this year? I ticked off New Beginnings for Rosh Hashanah, the language of liberal white people about racism for Martin Luther King Day and Black History Month, spiritual resilience and endurance for the morning of the Austin Marathon, when it will take me an hour instead of 12 minutes to get here, and a farewell sermon in May. Finally, I mentioned today's sermon and told her that the working title was The Gifts of Age. Well, Susan, she said, that'll be about 10 blank pages, won't it? and by the way, she said, are you familiar with Proverbs 16:31? Why, no, I said, but I'm sure that in my many voyages through the Old Testament, I must have read it. What does it say? Judith whipped out her iPad, went to the BibleGateway.com website, and read these prophetic words to me. A gray head is a crown of glory. It is found in the way of righteousness. Still laughing and considering myself crowned and glorious and righteous and wonderfully friended, I went home and wrote this sermon in almost one sitting. And it is indeed a sermon about why I feel age to be a gift from God and how the practice of reaching for the fruit of the Spirit renews that gift every day. All faith and wisdom traditions have many words to say about aging and dying. And because of my own religious heritage, I usually turn first to Hebrew and Christian scriptures as text and starting points for sermons, because I feel such an organic connection to them and the faiths they represent. So what I want to do in our time together this morning is to talk briefly about the context of each of the scriptural passages I chose for our readings, and then to talk about how these passages speak to and with each other and what their ongoing lessons can be for us. The New Testament passage about the fruit of the Spirit is part of a strongly polemic letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the early Christian churches he had founded in the first century in Galatia, which was a region in Central Asia Minor and is now in Turkey. The converts to Christianity who comprised the membership of these new churches were mostly from two groups: Jews who had come to believe that Jesus was the Messiah they had hoped for, and pagans of Celtic origin who had migrated to the area in prior centuries. Paul had learned that some of the Jewish converts were urging the pagan converts to follow traditional Jewish practices, such as circumcision, Sabbath observance, and dietary laws, as the appropriate next step in demonstrating their new faith. Paul saw this as a threat to the new Christianity, and his impassioned letter to the Galatians admonishes them that righteousness, which in Hebrew and Christian scriptures means a right covenantal relationship with God, that righteousness depends not on observance of religious law, but on receiving the fruit of the Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, humility, and temperance. Notice that the King James Version I read accurately translates the singular form of the Greek word for fruit, karpos. We would transliterate that as K-A-R-P-O-S. It uses karpos to encompass 9 different things. Throughout the New Testament, the word karpos is used literally to mean the fruit of trees, fields, and the earth. And it's also used metaphorically to mean human works and deeds. And some of you know, by your fruits you shall know them. What's so interesting in the use of the singular noun to encompass 9 different virtues is its clear implication that the gift of the Spirit is a package deal. No one of these 9 marks of character stands alone, but all are in relation to each other. Fortunately, it's not hard for us to translate this New Testament concept into Unitarian Universalist language. And we can think of our 7th principle, and we also can say about that all of the values stated in our principles form their own interdependent web. Those values of dignity, justice, equity, compassion, acceptance, encouragement, freedom, democracy, responsibility, conscience, peace, liberty, and respect. They function as a whole package deal, and they function best in concert with each other. And we can also say that each one of us contains our own interdependent web of the 9 things enumerated in Galatians, and that each of us functions best when those 9 character traits are operating in relation to each other. On the other hand, we know as a congregation and as individuals that when one of those gifts is missing or malfunctioning, the collective and personal webs are torn. It's hard, for example, and we've seen this lately in ourselves, it's hard to practice gentleness if we don't have patience. It's hard to encourage each other if we don't have respect. Those fruits and gifts are handed to us with grace and abundance, and they're intended to work synergistically and to keep us whole and holy. So, how on earth does this notion of karpos, the fruit of the Spirit, pertain to the passage in Ecclesiastes about there being a right time for everything? The ancient Greeks had 2 words for time: chronos, which referred to chronological or sequential time, and kairos. We would transliterate that as K-A-I-R-O-S, kairos, which meant the right or opportune time, a period or a season in which a significant event happens. I'll come back to these 2 concepts of time in just a minute. The book of Ecclesiastes is thought to have been written in the 3rd century BC, possibly by David's son Solomon. This was a time of change and upheaval in Israelite culture and the culture surrounding it, largely due to the standardization of currency, the upsurge in commercialization that it engendered, and the fact that not everyone had benefited equally from these changes. The author of Ecclesiastes surveys life, finds that much of it is evil and unjust, observes that humans have many limitations, and yet maintains that even in the face of death, we should embrace life and its good things as gifts from God. In other words, even though life is precarious and perplexing, and God is mysterious and unfathomable, it's good to keep on seeking and searching, standing in awe of the holy, and finding enjoyment in love, work, and play. In a recent discussion with a wise Mennonite pastor, I started talking about how this passage illuminates the many contradictions which give our lives texture and fullness and three-dimensionality, and which keep our minds and hearts expanding in our intellectual and emotional attempts to hold and entertain conflicting feelings, opinions, and points of view in ourselves and in others. Because she's a Bible scholar and I'm not, the pastor kindly pointed out that the words from Ecclesiastes also remind us to live in Kairos time, not the kind of time that has us counting our years, but the one that lets us dwell in the right season of time. And I begin to think about the time I'm now living in with all of you. One of the best things about this congregation is that it's truly multi-generational. And even though the younger church is with us only partway through our Sunday services, they remind us of our youth, our love of stories and fun activities, the freedom of hopping down the aisle and sitting on the floor, the ability to get up from the floor, and the fact that aging is the province of us all. And I think I'm safely guessing that given the choice, none of us grown-ups here in this room would want to be 8 or even 18 again. For no matter what adult age we are, we know on some level or another that there's no substitute for maturity, experience, and perspective. I've never had any of those major birthday thingies, none of those life begins at 40 moments, or the crepe-hanging idea that I was over the hill at 50, or that at 60 I was older than dirt. But 70 has given me some impetus for reflection about what I've learned about the fruit the Spirit of God continues to hold out to me, and about how to enjoy all 9 parts of it in Kairos time here with you. The year before I moved to Austin in June 2014 to intern with this church, I lived in a retirement community in Houston. At the age of 66, I was the youngest resident there, and almost everyone else was old enough to be my parents. Many of them fondly referred to me as the youngster or addressed me as kid, and I enjoyed it enormously. But even more, I enjoyed them and learned so much from them about aging and about how receiving and propagating the fruit of the Spirit led them day by day to an appreciation of Kairos time and to an extraordinary ability to live in the gift of the present. As I look back over the gift of years, and especially my time living among superannuated, very old people in their late 80s and 90s, I began writing down lessons learned and gifts received from them and from others who've loved me and cared about me. And I thought I would share some of my favorite ones with you now. The first is that it's important to know what we believe, but it's even more important to know what we hold sacred. For what we hold sacred will inform our actions much more than what we believe. Second, the past is our ally, for in it we learned how to grieve and to laugh, to say hello and say goodbye, to experience heart-stopping beauty and soul-destroying evil, to know pain and to know healing. In the process of moving from the developmental injuries each of us sustained in childhood to a mature spiritual adulthood, we've learned how to feel all the things, and this in itself is a cause for rejoicing. Third, The most generous and godlike act we can perform is to embrace our imperfections and those of others, and to be less judgmental and more yielding. Fourth, and as a corollary to number 3, as we give language to the impulses of our hearts and souls, one of the best goals is to become fluent in forgiveness. Fifth, every disenchantment and disappointment is an opportunity for learning. In other words, everything and everyone teaches, if only we're willing to learn. Sixth, spiritual growth is not so much a matter of letting God in as letting God out. Seventh, if we think of aging only in physical terms and chronos time, it often doesn't seem like much of a blessing. But if we think of it in terms of kairos time, for which there's a purpose and a readiness, aging becomes an interior landscape of great beauty where new priorities emerge, where we can relax into who we are and into the open freedom of deep being, and where the quality of our presence is strong and full and spacious. We've all known elders like this. Many of them are sitting in the pews among us right here and right now. Those wise ones who know how to let time go by without losing the life it contains, who have created uncomplicated agendas for happiness, who have made peace with how much they've forgotten, who practice gratitude for all they remember, and who transform regret into relief. Those wise ones who set aside interest in the chronological beginnings and endings of things, and instead cherish the kind of love to which we dedicate ourselves for so long that we no longer remember quite how it began. Those elders who fully witness the faith and anticipation of younger people about what lies in store for them, and who stay steady when they feel the frightening speed of the one-way journey of our lives, and see the wave of mortality breaking over them and everyone they know. Those wise ones who know what it means to grow a soul, who have a sense of ongoingness and have learned how to rest in it. Eighth, if we lean gently into our fears, we can avoid curling inward in doubt, and we may even find that we are leaning on everlasting arms. Ninth, not everything that counts can be counted. And 10th and finally, from here on out, it's all about gratitude and the knowledge that we are always, always together in the presence of God. Karpos and kairos, the ninefold fruit offered freely to us by a Holy Spirit, and the perfect time for gathering, ingesting, and sharing that fruit. Affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity, a willingness to stick with things, a sense of compassion in the heart, loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, marshaling and directing our energies wisely, and a conviction that a basic holiness permeates everything and everyone. I see all of these fruits, this karpos, in you, and I continue to receive them from you as we all age together every minute of every hour. Most of all, I thank God for letting me see this day, this part of my life, this kairos time with you. Grace to us and peace.